Sun Legends. Right. Tonight's story is about the Witches of Cheltenham. You might go, oh no, I tried to watch that last night. It didn't work. So that's why I had to redo this. Sorry about that. So now the reason why I picked on witches is it's quite interesting because with witches, everyone's got witches all over the place, but we can't sort of like pin them down sometimes to dates, times and names. And this case actually has got all that information. So it's traceable, so it's good for that one. Right, so we're going to start off, first of all, we're not talking about the flying witches. This takes place in 1566, 100 years before the fire of London. And it takes place in Cheltenham. So it's down south again, this one. Now, there's three protagonists in this story. There's three ladies involved in this story. The first lady is a lady called Elizabeth Francis. Now, Elizabeth Francis lived in a small village just outside Cheltenham. And the story goes that she actually had a penchant for one of the local gentlemen and asked the gentleman out. Ooh. Well, unfortunately, the gentleman wasn't that actually into her. And so he said no. And so the story says, a couple of days later, he mysteriously passed away. Now, one thing that witches were commonly known to have was what we call a familiar. A familiar was normally an animal. It could be a toad, a wing, a bat, or something like that. In this case, it was a cat. Now, a couple of days after this gentleman had passed away, Elizabeth took her cat. Now, cats weren't pets like they are now. Cats were there to kill the mice that were eating grain, which you make flour out of. So she took the cat to her friend. Now, her friend was called Agnes Waterhouse, and she had a daughter, Joan. And they took the cat in, and they were all friends in the same village, and peace was restored to the village. Nothing happened, really. And then Agnes and Joan, we're not sure which one, had this like a rerun. They saw a young gentleman. They were interested. One was interested. Now, we're not sure. It could be either of the ladies interested. Agnes was 63 at the time, so she would qualify as a cougar. So, now the weird thing is, the gentleman wasn't interested. So, and a couple of days later, yeah, you guessed it, he passed away. Now, this was a bit suspicious. Small village, two men die, fairly young, within a very short period of time. The magistrate gets involved, and all three ladies are arrested. Word has it that they were involved in witchcraft. Now, witchcraft is not a thing to be sniffed at in those days. It carried the death penalty. So they went to court. They were thrown in the jail, and they went to court in front of the magistrate. And the first one in front of the magistrates was Agnes. Now, Agnes, when all the evidence was heard, was found guilty. There was only one sentence. She was to be taken from there and hung by the neck. And so she was. She was taken from there and hung by the neck and executed. The next one up was her daughter, Joan. Now, Joan was actually released. She was found not guilty of any wrongdoing whatsoever. So she was released. So off she went. We don't hear any more about Joan, so we presume she had a very long and happy life after that. Quick scraping with the law. The third lady, yeah, it's Elizabeth Francis. Now, Elizabeth Francis was found not guilty. And off she went. That's not the end of the story. About 10, 15 years later, I've got the actual date. It was 1579. Elizabeth Francis was back in front of, the magistrate again. Same charge, witchcraft. This time, Elizabeth wasn't getting away with it. All the evidence was heard, and Elizabeth was found guilty. Again, only one sentence: death by hanging. And from there she was taken and hung by the neck until she was dead. We don't know whatever happened to the cat. We presume that legged it after the first two of his masters were got rid of. But that it seems a bit extreme that somebody could be executed because of hearsay. But there was crimes you could do which would not really quantify as a crime today. So I'm going to give a couple of examples. The first one was a gentleman, a husband, if he went in and his wife was nagging him constantly, he could actually apply to the court for a gagging order. Now, in those days, it's exactly what it sounds. The court, if it was happy to put a gagging order on the wife, would order her to be fitted what we call a skull's bridle. I forgot then for a second. A skull's bridle. Now, a skull's bridle is like a cap come chastity belt for the head, we'll call it. And it goes across the head, down in steel, and then it goes up and it actually goes into the mouth. A piece goes into the mouth, it's locked in position, and that holds the tongue down so the lady can't nag. Now, she could be fitted it for just a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks, depending on how much she'd nagged the husband. So, now I know at this point, any gentleman watching this, if the wife's listening as well, he can probably feel the laser eyes glaring at him at the side, saying in that invisible voice, don't you dare go and start making anything in the shed now. So, now the last one I'm going to tell you, the last example for tonight, is if the gentleman was fed up of his wife completely. Divorce was very hard and very expensive to do in those days, and it was very rare. Now, what you could do, though, is you could take your wife out on a Sunday walk. Yeah, go down to the car boot sale. And normally it's on the place where they used to have the cattle market. Well, after the cattle had been sold in medieval days, sometimes in some areas they'd have a wife market. So you could sell your wife. Or you could buy a wife if you wanted. If you haven't got a wife, you could buy the wife from the cattle market. So that was another way of actually terminating your agreement. Again, just to upset the gentleman, just in case they're going, ha ha, and the wife's going, oh. Both of those laws, unfortunately, are no longer in effect. Sorry to spoil it, gentlemen, you can't do any of those nowadays. They are long past and been repealed. So, but I thought I'd tell you to show you how extreme and how bizarre some of the laws were in those days. All right, that's all for tonight. If you've enjoyed it, push subscribe, follow me if you like, share, tell your friends about it. Just say, listen to Mick, he tells you loads of useless information, because that's essentially what I'm telling you. It's all out to date, but it's interesting. This is how history's carries on. Yeah, so I do hope you've enjoyed yourself. I'll find another interesting bits of facts and stories for you next time from some more myths and legends from Great Britain. All right, by that, have a lovely night.